Hello guys, and thank you for joining us in another episode of Middle-earth and its fantasies. Today we are going to take a closer look at the Valar, the divine beings who shaped and ruled over the world of Middle-earth in J.R.R. Tolkien's Legendarium. Who are they? What are their powers and roles? And how did they interact with the other races of Middle-earth? If you are a fan of The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, or The Silmarillion, you will definitely want to watch this video till the end. The Valar are the most powerful of the Ainur, the primordial spirits who were created by Eru Iluvatar, the supreme deity of Tolkien's universe. The Ainur participated in the music of the Ainur, a cosmic symphony that envisioned the history and destiny of the world. The Valar were not born or made, but they were the thoughts of Iluvatar, the One, who is the supreme deity of Tolkien's universe. Iluvatar created the Ainur, the Holy Ones, from his mind, and he taught them to make music with their voices. The Ainur sang before Iluvatar, and they expressed their knowledge and their love for him. Iluvatar then showed them a vision of a world that was based on their music, and he named it A, which means the world that is. He told the Ainur that they could enter the world and fulfill their vision, or they could stay with him in the timeless halls. Some of the Ainur entered the world, which was called Ea, and became its guardians and rulers. They were divided into two groups, the Valar, who were the greater Ainur, and the Maiar, who were the lesser Ainur. The Valar and the Maiar are collectively known as the powers of the world. The Valar were the greater Ainur, and the Maiar were the lesser Ainur. The Valar were the first to enter the world, and they found it dark and shapeless. They began to shape the world according to the vision that they had seen, and they made the lands, the seas, the skies, and the lights. They also made the lamps of the Valar, which illuminated the world, and the two trees of Valinor, which gave light to their realm. They also awakened the spirits of fire, water, earth, and air, and they became their servants and allies. The Valar were not like the other Ainur, or the other races of Middle-earth. They were immortal and ageless, and they did not need food or sleep. They could change their shape and appearance at will, and they could make bodies for themselves out of the matter of the world. They could also leave their bodies and become invisible, or travel across the world in spirit form. They had great power and wisdom, and they could manipulate the elements and the forces of nature. They also had different aspects and domains, and they were associated with different colors, metals, gems, and symbols. The Valar were also known by different names and titles, depending on the language and the culture of the elves and the men. The elves called them the Valar, which means the powers, or the Aratar, which means the exalted. The men called them the Lords of the West, or the gods of Arda. The Valar also had individual names and titles which reflected their attributes and roles. For example, Manwë was also called Sulimo, which means the breather of winds, or Elwë, which means the Star King. Varda was also called Elentari, which means the Star Queen, or Tintale, which means the Kindler. Ulmo was also called King of the Sea, or Lord of Waters. Aule was also called Mahal, which means the Maker, or Namo, which means the Shaper. Melkor was also called Morgoth, which means the Black Enemy, or Bauglir, which means the Constrainer. The Valar settled in the continent of Aman, also known as the Undying Lands, where they built their own realm called Valinor, the land of the Valar. There they dwelt in bliss and harmony, and created many wonders and beauties. They also fashioned the two trees of Valinor, which gave light to their land and were the source of their power. The Valar had different aspects and domains, and each of them had a spouse, except for Melkor, the rebellious Valar who became the Dark Lord and the enemy of the world. The Valar were not only different from the other Ainur, but also from the other races of Middle-earth, who were called the children of Iluvatar. These were the elves, the firstborn, who were immortal and fair, and the men, the second-born, who were mortal and diverse. The Valar also encountered other races, such as the dwarves, who were made by all, the hobbits, who were a branch of men, and the orcs, who were corrupted by Melkor. The Valar had different relationships with these races, depending on their nature and their role in the world. The Valar loved and cared for the elves, who were the most similar to them in spirit and in beauty. The Valar invited the elves to live with them in Valinor, where they taught them many things and gave them many gifts. The Valar also fought for the elves against Melkor, who enslaved and killed many of them. The Valar respected the elves' free will, and they did not interfere with their choices, even when they were wrong or tragic. The Valar also mourned for the elves, who suffered many losses and sorrows in their long history. The Valar were more distant and mysterious to the men, who were the most different from them in fate and in power. The Valar did not invite the men to Valinor, but they allowed some of them to visit or settle there. The Valar also helped the men against Melkor, who deceived and corrupted many of them. The Valar did not understand the men's mortality, and they were curious and fearful of their destiny. The Valar also admired the men, who showed courage and hope in their short lives. The Valar were fond and protective of the dwarves, who were the children of Aule. The Valar accepted the dwarves as part of the world, even though they were not made by Iluvatar. The Valar also aided the dwarves against Melkor, who coveted their treasures and their skills. The Valar did not interfere with the dwarves' affairs, and they respected their independence and their secrecy. The Valar also appreciated the dwarves, who were loyal and steadfast in their friendship and their enmity. The Valar were surprised and amused by the hobbits, who were small and simple folk. The Valar did not know much about the hobbits, who lived far away from their sight and their influence. The Valar also supported the hobbits against Melkor, who underestimated and ignored them. The Valar did not expect much from the hobbits, and they were impressed by their courage and their kindness. The Valar also cherished the hobbits, who brought joy and laughter to the world. The Valar were angry and disgusted by the orcs, who were the servants and the slaves of Melkor. The Valar did not recognize the orcs as part of the world, but they were the twisted and tortured versions of the elves and the men. The Valar also fought against the orcs, who were the enemies and the destroyers of the world. The Valar did not pity the orcs, and they showed them no mercy or compassion. The Valar also hated the orcs, who were the embodiment and the instrument of evil in the world. There were 14 Valar in total, 7 male and 7 female. They were Manwë, the king of the Valar and the lord of the air. He was the noblest and wisest of the Valar, and the closest to the will of Iluvatar. He had the power to see and hear everything that happened in the world, and he communicated with the eagles who were his messengers. His spouse was Varda, the queen of the Valar and the lady of the stars. She was the most revered and beloved of the Valar, especially by the elves, who called her Elbereth. She created the stars and the constellations and had the power to pierce the darkness and the evil of Melkor. Ulmo, the lord of the waters. He was the second in might and authority among the Valar, and the most independent and unpredictable. He had no spouse and no permanent dwelling, but he roamed the seas and the oceans, and sometimes the rivers and the lakes. He had the power to control the water and the weather, and he communicated with the creatures of the sea, and sometimes with the elves and the men, through music and dreams. He was the most concerned and involved with the fate of the world, and often helped the free peoples against the evil of Melkor. Aule, the lord of the earth and the smith of the Valar. He was the most skilled and creative of the Valar, and the maker of many things, such as the mountains, the gems, the metals, and the dwarves, who were his children. He had a great love for the world and its matter, but he also had a great desire to create and to teach, which sometimes led him to conflict with the other Valar, especially with Yavanna, his spouse, and Melkor, his former pupil. His spouse was Yavanna, the lady of the earth and the giver of fruits. She was the most caring and nurturing of the Valar, and the mother of all living things, such as the plants, the animals, and the Ents, who were her guardians. She had the power to make things grow and flourish, and she loved the forests and the fields. Orome, the lord of the forests and the huntsman of the Valar. He was the most adventurous and valiant of the Valar and the lover of the wild lands. He often rode across the world on his great steed Nahar, hunting the monsters and the servants of Melkor, and blowing his mighty horn Valaroma, which filled the enemies with fear and the friends with hope. He was the first of the Valar to discover the elves, and he taught them many things. His spouse was Varna, the Lady of the Flowers and the Ever-Young. She was the most joyful and radiant of the Valar, and the sister of Yavanna. She had the power to make things blossom and renew, and she loved the gardens and the meadows. Mandos, the Lord of the Dead, and the keeper of the houses of the dead. He was the most solemn and stern of the Valar, and the master of fate and doom. He had the power to see the past and the future, and he pronounced the judgments and the prophecies of the Valar. He seldom spoke, and when he did, his words were final and irrevocable. He guarded the spirits of the elves and the men who died, and he decided their fate after death. His spouse was Vaire, the Lady of the Weaving and the Weaver of Time. She was the most diligent and industrious of the Valar and the recorder of his story. She had the power to weave the tapestries that depicted the events and the stories of the world, and she hung them on the walls of the halls of Mandos, Lorien, the Lord of Dreams and the Master of Visions. He was the most gentle and peaceful of the Valar, and the giver of rest and healing. He had the power to send dreams and visions to the minds of the living and to influence their mood and spirit. He dwelt in the gardens of Lorien, where he grew the flowers that produced a soothing fragrance, and where he slept on an island surrounded by a lake. His spouse was Este, the Lady of Healing and the Healer of Hurts. She was the most gracious and soothing of the Valar, and the helper of Lorien. She had the power to heal the wounds and the weariness of the body and the soul, and she rested on the island of Lorien, where she slept on a bed of flowers. Tulkas, the Lord of Strength and the champion of the Valar. He was the most fearless and merry of the Valar, and the lover of sport and combat. He had the power to wield his great fists and his golden hair as weapons, and he was unmatched in strength and speed. He was the last of the Valar to enter the world, and he helped the other Valar to defeat Melkor in the First War. He was always ready to fight and to laugh, and he had no care for wisdom or foresight. His spouse was Nessa, the Lady of Dance and the Dancer of the Valar. She was the most agile and graceful of the Valar, and the sister of Orome. She had the power to run and dance faster than the wind, and she loved the deer and the antelopes who followed her wherever she went. Melkor, the Lord of Darkness and the enemy of the world. He was the most powerful and ambitious of the Valar, and the source of all evil in the world. He had the power to corrupt and destroy anything he touched, and he desired to rule over everything and to make it his own. He rebelled against Iluvatar and the other Valar, and he marred the music of the Ainur and the world. He was the master of lies and deceit, and he seduced many of the Ainur and the other races to his service. He had no spouse and no love, but he lusted after Arda, the earth, and he sought to possess it. He was also known as Morgoth, the Black Foe, and he was the enemy of the Valar and the free peoples of Middle-earth. These were the Valar, the mighty and majestic beings who shaped and ruled over the world of Middle-earth. They had many deeds and adventures, and they influenced the history and the destiny of the world and its inhabitants. They were not perfect, and they made mistakes and errors, but they were also noble and benevolent, and they tried to do what was best for the world and its children. They were the closest thing to gods in Tolkien's universe, but they were not omnipotent or omniscient, and they had to abide by the will of Iluvatar and the music of the Ainur. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and share it with your friends. And if you want to learn more about the Valar and the world of Middle-earth, stay tuned for our next videos, where we will explore the Maiar, the Astari, the Balrogs, and more. Thank you for watching, and see you next time on Realms Revealed.